I'm Daniel Basis. I'm a former president of the New York Financial Writers Association. I've been a financial journalist for close to 30 years, and the majority of that time, nearly all of it, I was a member and have been and continue to be a member of the New York Financial Writers Association. This is the area where there will always be a constant need for journalists who are knowledgeable, who understand the financial markets, who understand business. This is the area where you can really have an impact. Every person who has any kind of involvement in financial markets, whether it be owning a stock, a retirement fund, their house or apartment or renting. I mean, financial news touches people in ways that I don't think they understand necessarily. So if you want to be in a field that you can have an impact and don't get too jaded about it because you may not feel it right away, understand that you are having an impact. You are having influence on how the debate and how the discussions are structured and how people understand the world that they live in on a very individual level, as well as a very high level macro scale as well. A lot of that hostility that people talk about and fake news, and it's not even a real term. It's a crutch that a certain individual has taken on and used as a cudgel against individuals who have no other interest other than trying to tell the truth. Does that mean that all journalists are great and they're all honest, straight down the middle? No. But I think the vast majority of them are. I think what people have to discern is that there's a difference between being a journalist and being a columnist, right? There's a difference between delivering news that is straight down the middle, factual, trying to give both sides, trying to live up to the art that we practice. And then there are people who are columnists who have an axe to grind or a position to push. So what happens at the New York Financial Writers Association? Well, you can have a mixture of all those people. It's a place where there's a forum for people to discuss, a forum to get together. Maybe a columnist had been a reporter and vice versa. And you can, kind of in a relaxed atmosphere, have a discussion. But it's also a place where serious debate occurs. And over the generations of financial journalists that have participated in the nation's oldest business journalism organization, it was created in 1938 in New York. It's a place that has seen some of the greats in the journalism industry, in the business, as members, as productive members. Well, yeah, it could be a bit of a talking shop, but it's impromptu. It's off to the side. It's not affecting what people are necessarily covering, but it may affect how they write about things if they have that forum or that place where they know that there are peers that they can either discuss things with or maybe get pushback against on an opinion. I think I'd rather have an organization like that than not in this world. And it's also about camaraderie and friendships that you make and opportunities that people can get from participating and being members. Certainly for myself, as a young journalist, it was kind of my first introduction to who are all these people that are in my industry and where do they come from and what are their backgrounds and how did they get into it, and do I stand out in any way, or am I following in the footsteps of others, or it's a touchstone. You don't feel kind of cast out into the work world. You have maybe a group that understands you a little bit better than perhaps people who don't work in the financial or business sections of publications, or as columnists or bloggers or videographers or whatnot. I, for one, as a young journalist, joined the board of governors for the financial writers. I became president. At the time, I was the youngest president in the organization's history. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of times where I'm in leadership roles now as a managing editor of a publication, and having been an editor at some of the largest news organizations, one of the largest news organizations in the world. I often think back, if I've got a situation where I have to make decisions, or I have to, do my leadership thing. It's a poor way of saying it, but being the leader and editing and leading people and telling them, look, we need to go in this direction, or how do you feel about that? A lot of it, I say to myself, where did I come up with that? Or how did I have that experience where it doesn't feel so uncomfortable? In fact, it feels more comfortable. I find myself coming back to the financial writers. You know what it's like trying to herd 16 volunteer journalists into an organization that produces scholarships of $30,000 or $40,000 a year and puts on the Financial Follies, and at a time when we did a second dinner and speakers and luncheons. There are a few places where you can get that kind of experience, and all you got to do is raise your hand and say, hey, I want to be a part of this. I am probably the only third generation financial journalist, well, certainly at the Financial Writers and maybe even the world, I don't know. But my grandfather was a member of the Financial Writers Association. He was a senior editor, the deputy business editor at the New York Times, worked there for over 50 odd years. My uncle was a financial journalist, having worked at various publications around New York. And then I became a journalist, and they had both passed away long before I ever had a chance to think about journalism. I was still a kid. And so the Financial Writers offered me a chance to kind of hear about my family, just not by design, just as it happened. Hear about my family from the people that they interacted with. And I'm very lucky that my uncle and my grandfather were beloved people of this organization. There's a scholarship named after them. They both passed away too soon. But I feel a connection. I'm lucky in this way. I'm lucky that I didn't get a chance to spend more time with them growing up, but I'm lucky in that, given those circumstances, I had an organization that actually knew them and could tell me stories about them and how they treated people and how they conducted themselves. So for me, the Financial Writers has served that purpose, and it's very unique, and I doubt anybody else has had that kind of experience. So it's meant that to me, but it's also, as I said, meant a place to be seen and heard. Some people like to be seen and heard more than others. I tend to be on the latter. But it's been a great place to learn, socialize, kind of feel a connection to a history that you would see it would be hidden. Because when you walk into the newsrooms, you're seeing the here and now, and you're seeing the graybeards, I suppose. But you don't have that sense of history, sweep, and perspective that the Financial Writers can offer, or does offer, and still does to this day. The idea that you walk into a newsroom and you see it all there is, you get through the day-to-day, right? It's a daily miracle, so to speak. It's not, it's an old cliche, right? But I think what the Financial Writers offers is that if there's another person in the organization that's a member, so you share both their work and your professional kind of club membership or association membership with, it offers a bit of a crossover to say, well, we used to do it this way and we used to do it that way, or newsrooms used to operate in such a different way than they do today. Oh my goodness, we used to do this. We had to fill it out on typewriter. We had to, do carbon paper, and now it's all electronic. And yeah, okay, that's, we all know that. It's a bit, not new. But I think the association offers a chance to talk to people who, you're outside of your business, right? Your place of business, and you get to have that conversation with somebody who was there, but is not judging you. It's somebody who is able to say that, this is the way life used to be. We used to do it in such a different way. It's evolved in so much, in so many different ways. And so I think people pick up and they get a sense of connection. And then maybe they even get a sense of, well, I know that there are things done the new way, but we can't forget how places operated and why they operated the way they did. and how they evolved. And did it evolve because of the news flow? Did it evolve because of the technology? Did it evolve because of how businesses operated, laws that change, tax law, securities law, all of those things? And you've got this resource actually in the financial writers, because there are some people who are absolute experts on certain areas. And I have called them, if I'm stuck on a story, and I say, hey, so-and-so, you've been covering securities law for 20 years, and maybe I'm doing it for a day. At least I have a resource outside of my newsroom that I can call. And that person's not going to judge me, and that person is going to do it because out of the goodness of their heart, for one, but secondly, because they believe in the craft. They're a member of the Financial Writers Association, and they're saying, well, somebody's calling me, and maybe they feel good. I've had people call me and ask me for advice on how to cover a story or how to look at something, and I can offer it with no problems. It's kind of like that secret resource that you have in your back pocket that you can tap and use when you need that little extra value add that you want to show your editors. Hey, yeah, I know that happened. There was a case 30 years ago, and this is what happened, and so we could apply it to today. Well, how am I going to know that? Because chances are, if you're in the business financial section of a news operation, you may be the only one, right? Not everybody is working for the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Financial Times. So just that alone means that if you're the financial journalist who's responsible for covering all of these things, your affiliation with the association and all of the members gives you the opportunity to tap a resource, get some help, and it doesn't cost you anything. So when I look at the history of the association, and I look at how I grew up in it over the last 30 odd years, the richness of the people who, the richness of their knowledge and experience is something that I've been able to tap into at times to be able to kind of give my stories a bit more sweep in perspective, a boost in terms of showing people that we're just not surface. We go below the surface. And sometimes it works out. Sometimes you get advice and it doesn't work out, but at least you have something to bounce off of. And so the association gives you a resource from the friendships that you make. Maybe somebody knows somebody. You call one person, they call another. You're all within kind of the group. They're more willing to take your call on a busy day, maybe a deadline, to help out. You're asking for advice. You're asking for help. The association, I think, like any association, gives that advantage to journalists, especially young journalists who are coming up. And I think that's an added benefit. I don't think people think about that. They just naturally may slide into that kind of mode, and good for them to do so. Take advantage of what it offers. I mean, it's kind of the best bargain in the world, really, when you talk about membership and what you get and all the people that you can meet. So I think it's one of the hidden benefits that people don't recognize until it actually happens, until they have the idea, ooh, I know somebody, I can call them. That's what the association gives me as an advantage. Unless you're a member of the audience, right, which is just being surrounded by 1,000 people all catching up, it's the best night for financial journalism in New York. It's the one night when everybody gets together. You see people, you're talking to sources, maybe you have sources there that you don't want to recognize, but you say hello. There's a mixture of the public relations field and the journalists, and it's the one night where kind of everyone's in one place. And so that's a nice thing. For me, I think if you're a member of the association, getting up on stage was always, the thing that you either did or did not do. So when you're a board member or you become president, you're expected to, help out. So I guess the memorable experience is being on stage as with a solo, and you're singing in front of 1,000 people, and you're terrible because that's just not your thing. I mean, if I was a better singer, I wouldn't be a financial writer, right? But memorable is hitting the high note, completing the number, you know, stretching out your arms or whatever you're supposed to be doing, and it's, you know, everybody's kind of on, you know, in the audience looking at you, and you're on stage, and either they're laughing at you or clapping, right? Hopefully they're not booing, which is not uncommon. So I guess just being on stage, there's no one specific, you know, event other than, you know, being in the finale or being a solo on for whatever goofy skit that you're supposed to be doing. And you can always say for the rest of your life, yeah, I played on Broadway, no problem. So when I joined the association, there was no website. I think it was a generational shift. You have to remember that the association used to be a real kind of key social outlet for the financial writing community, where, you know, people would get together on weekends and they would see each other, and there was no cell phones, there was no computers for the most part, or internet certainly, right? So the social outlet was, you know, you pick up a telephone or you see somebody in person and you make a plan, and that's how you got together. It was a social gathering, and that's why the association, I think, survived, because it was a social gathering. It wasn't just business. It was friendships and education and doing some news as well by holding, you know, panel discussions and luncheons with newsmakers and having keynote speakers. And that was shifting as the work flow changed. That was shifting as people just didn't have time to spend. So the Follies, which has always been the centerpiece, started to, be honest with you, lose people being able to come. Not because they didn't want to. You know, do people really want to get up on stage and make fools of themselves? Well, you know, if you're amongst friends, why not, right? But I think what occurred was a shift in the business flow of life, right? The workflow of life. And I built the first website for the association in the mid-90s. I went out and bought something off the shelf and just created it because we needed it. And then when I was president, I noticed this kind of decline in the social interaction. So we got to do something outside of the Follies, because people can't devote from September to November 2 days a week, 2 nights a week, coming in and practicing and singing in a hotel, you know, conference room, while they try to work out the music and people are writing lyrics. You don't have time for that. I created Drink Night, right? So which was a once a month thing, where if you're a member, we'll give you a couple of drinks at a local watering hole and get together, right? It was a good place for young people, old, what have you. And to try to keep up the social interactions and relations throughout the year. I'm happy to say both things live on. So now they've evolved it, and I'm glad they've made it better, right? The website is much better than when I built it, and Drink Night is now no longer just Drink Night, it's author speaking, you know, author night, speakers coming in, kind of giving something other than, you know, just the Follies, because as I said, the Follies was the main social kind of get together, and you know, the crescendo of the year, you know, always, you know, before Thanksgiving. It's kind of nice. It's something on the calendar to look forward to. So I think it's changed in the way that people interact with it, and I hope it just keeps on evolving. It has to. It will. I would say the professionalism, the sophistication of financial and business news has gone up exponentially. Whereas, you know, before you could be forgiven for not knowing what an Excel spreadsheet is, now it's requirement. You know, to be able to run your numbers, to be able to do your own calculations, to be able to go back to your sources and say, well, that didn't add up. Why is that? Or what am I missing? How do I build my own model? Can I build my own index? You know, how do I understand this arcane, really sophisticated and very opaque business of credit default swaps, for crying out loud? Well, you've got to become an expert on that. You've got to know enough to be able to explain it to people in print or on TV, so that you can help lead them towards greater knowledge. You may not be the world's renowned expert on it, but as a journalist, your job is to at least uncover enough, illustrate enough, make transparent enough so that people can make their own decisions. Financial journalism is a much, much more sophisticated animal today than it was when I started, and I think it will continue to do so if people remain devoted to the craft and not just take what's handed out. And that's always been the issue, whether it was 70 years ago or today, right? It's always about this push and pull of what a company or a public relations firm wants to tell you, and it's spin, and you as the sophisticated journalist can see through that spin and understand when you're being led down the garden path and when you're actually being led towards something that's real and knowledgeable and true and factual. I'd say young financial journalists today need to be cognizant of not everything is a press release, not everything is handed to you. There's much more investigation now. It's being able to look at the charts and interpret them and try to bounce your theories off of the professionals. Sometimes you maybe get it right, sometimes you may get it wrong, or sometimes you may disagree. Well, you can disagree and you can write that story as long as you can back it up. If you can back it up, well, have confidence. Have confidence to do that. So in the past, as I mentioned, there was a much cozier relationship between public relations and business journalism, right? And business journalism really had to come into its own and really own it, and also make sure that there was a bit of a separation. So in the old days, say at the Follies, there were a lot of after parties. Where are the after parties and who are they sponsored by? And the tobacco companies were big sponsors, right? Well, that wouldn't play today, obviously, and it doesn't. So things have evolved. A drinks company will sponsor something. Do we want to be promoting that, or it's a question of, as a journalist, am I supposed to stay neutral? Yeah, I am. Do I go to the party? Well, does that impinge upon my neutrality? I'd say no. I think, if you can be bought for a glass of cheap scotch, then you got bigger problems, right? I think, in my book, I always pay. I go Dutch or I always pay. Just because that's the way I was taught. And it reduces any questions, right? In the old days, maybe that didn't happen as much. I think journalists are still not paid enough, but they're better paid than they used to be. Some of them quite well, which is good. You can't have a world where you don't pay for the news. You don't pay for the news, that's when you get fake news. And it's not even, it's inaccurate. It's unreal, right? So to call it fake news actually bothers me, because it's not news. It's false, right? It's not real. There was things like in the old days where they'd have these grand weekends where, and this is before my time even, but I just heard about it, where journalists would be invited up to, say, a corporate headquarters for a big kind of Sunday barbecue with, events set up for the kids by the corporation, and the financial journalists would go, right? I don't think that would play at all. It has not played for 30 years, right? Certainly since I've been around. But it used to happen. It used to be that way. And that won't play anymore. That doesn't play anymore. So as it's evolved, it's gotten more sophisticated, it's gotten more professional, and there's a real clear line between news and advocacy. And I think that is what you want. At the end of the day, the financial writers have seen it through the sweep of history. You could argue, well, the financial writers did that so long ago, they should all be, hung from the tower or something like that. I mean, it evolves. I mean, what was normal then is not normal now. But what's constant is that the financial writers has been there and has evolved with it. Recognize when it's not been where it should be, and I think has been a standard bearer and a place where you can actually bounce these kinds of ethical questions off of people. You say, what do you think about this? Should we do this? And I can't tell you how many board meetings I've been in where we've had these discussions. What's acceptable and what's not? And there are very few places where you can do that. Financial writers, board meetings, and events are a place that happens and does take place. And I think that is, everybody's benefiting from that. Because once you do that, once you get it out in the open and talk about it, that gets transmitted down the line through the newsrooms. Where, again, back to the point about, you can go into a newsroom, you can see everything on the surface, but you don't know what's the history. This is a way of seeing that history and then getting back into the newsroom to be able to affect change and to make it a place where you feel good going every day.
Lastly, just what are some of your overall fondest memories being a part of this association all these years?
The fondest memories have been when we've worked on something and we bring it to fruition, whether it be the Follies or an event, and you feel like you've achieved something. That I get a personal satisfaction out of that. Making the website or hiring a new executive director or executive secretary rather, and that person lasts for a long time because they did a good job and everybody benefited. And so for me, if I was a part of that and I helped the association to live and fight another day in a healthier, stronger position, that's where I get the satisfaction for me. That's where, I can't say, oh, that event where, the Follies was fun, right? Getting up on stage, making a fool of yourself. Yeah, that's fun. But I get greater satisfaction out of the fact that the Financial Writers Association is stronger today than when I started. And I'm not saying it's because of me necessarily, but I feel like I contributed to that. I can't deny that I get great satisfaction from contributing with a lot of other people. The fact that it still lives on, it's still doing